Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening. Herbert Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian philosopher of communication theory, in his 1965 book titled Understanding Media, the Extension of Man, famously coined the phrase, "The medium is the message." He said that a medium affects the society in which it plays a role not only by the content delivered over the medium, but also by the characteristics of the medium itself. In today's world, physical, sexual, and psychological violence strikes women in epidemic proportions around the globe. It crosses every social and economic class, every religion, race, and ethnicity. From domestic abuse to rape as a weapon of war, violence against women is a gross violation of their human rights. Not only does it threaten women's health and their social and economic well-being, violence also thwarts global effort to reduce poverty. The role of the media is crucial to this issue of violence against women, both in terms of how the media covers the issue. It may be used as a tool to help people raise awareness and take action, but on the other hand, media can also be instrumental for increased rate of violence against women. The medium of expression, the message it relays, the impression it makes on its audience is key in curbing the menace of violence against women. These are the issues that our esteemed panelists here today in the evening will discuss, and we do hope that they will enrich our thinking by their observation and comments. This program is presented by Goethe-Institut, Max Mueller, Bhavan, Kolkata, jointly with the Victoria Memorial Hall and the Shukriti Foundation. May I now invite Dr. Jayanta Sengupta, Director, Victoria Memorial Hall, on stage to say a few words.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's event, which we are privileged and honored to co-host with Max Muller Bhavan Goethe-Institut and Kolkata Shukriti Foundation. This panel discussion on a subject which, notwithstanding the turnout tonight, is a subject that concerns all of us at all times. Violence against women and the role of the media. And this discussion features some of the leading authors, artists, activists, and journalists of our time. And so, without further ado, I hope I thank all of you for coming. Enjoy the discussions, do participate in these discussions, and we all hope to take away from tonight's event ideas that will make it possible for us to eradicate or at least contest this pernicious evil of violence against women. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sengupta. And now, may I request Mr. Frizo Mecca, Director of Goethe-Institut, Maxwell Bhavan, Kolkata, to address the audience.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, Ladies and Gentlemen, herzlich willkommen and a very warm welcome im Namen des Goethe-Instituts Max Müller-Bhavan, Kolkata. On September the 22nd, the first ever global study on female characters in popular films had been presented in New York. It reveals deep-seated discrimination and pervasive stereotyping of women and girls by the international film industry. The study was commissioned by the Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media with support from UN Women and the Rockefeller Foundation. The investigation analyzes popular films across the most profitable countries and territories internationally, including Australia, Brazil, China, France, Germany, India, Japan, Russia, South Korea, United States, United Kingdom, as well as UK-US collaborations. While women represent half of the world's population, less than 1/3 of all speaking characters in film are female. Let me repeat that. Less than 1/3 of all speaking characters in film are female. Less than a quarter of the fictional on-screen workforce is comprised of women. While the report shows how discriminatory attitudes that affect women and girls are reflected in film worldwide, it also points to some significant differences among countries. The frontrunners, UK, Brazil, South Korea, feature female characters in 38 to 36% of all speaking roles on screen. UK-US collaborations and Indian films are at the bottom of the pack, clocking in at 23.6% and 24.9% female respectively. Half of South Korean films featured a female lead or co-lead, as did 40% of the films analyzed from China, Japan, and Australia. 20 years ago, 189 governments adopted the Beijing Platform for Action, the international roadmap for gender equality, which called on media to avoid stereotypical and degrading depictions of women, said UN Women Executive Director Phumzile Mlambo Nkuga. With their powerful influence on shaping the perceptions of large audiences, the media are key players for the gender equality agenda. With influence comes responsibility, she added. Tonight's panel is comprised of very eminent speakers. Whereas what I have mentioned from the study looks at a global picture, the answers to our question most certainly lie in the local details. I am therefore very glad that tonight's eminent speakers have agreed to share their knowledge and their points of view with us here in Kolkata. To end, I would like to thank tonight's partners for the event, Dr. Sengupta and the whole team from Victoria Memorial, and Dr. Dasgupta for Kolkata Shukriti Foundation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mecca. May I now request Mr. Obijit Dasgupta to say a few words before we begin from Shukriti Foundation.
Good evening. We are already running late, courtesy the traffic of this city, and all the more because we had too many events happening around this particular area today, and not all very happy events. Anyway, welcome to this brilliant location. Enjoy the location. We have the best of speakers to speak on this particular topic. And we from Kolkata Shukriti Foundation, we believe that unless people are conscious, unless they are made aware, nothing's going to happen. So our success will be if you go back and discuss with people who matter, and discuss with the media who can actually disseminate. We are the media. I have been in the media. This NGO is a media. And we believe that we have to fight the so-called commercial television and bring in something that is socially purposive. I think without much ado, I think we should begin. Thank you very much.
Well, it's time to begin then. May I please introduce the speakers, the guest participants. We start with Ankita Mukherji. Ankita, may I invite you to come on stage and take your seat. Ankita Mukherji, a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford University. She is now the senior news editor, NDTV. She anchors the primetime show Newsbreak on NDTV 24/7 and the weekend edition of the Buck Stops Here. Of course, this is not the whole details. You will have folders in your seat which will have the full details of each speaker. Bhairavi Jani, may I now invite you to take your seat. Listed as one of the 30 most powerful women in India by India Today, is a fourth-generation entrepreneur, a development enthusiast, and a vivid venture philanthropist with a firm belief in creating livelihood opportunities through entrepreneurial ecosystems. Shri D.R. Kaarthikeyan, may I please invite him on stage. Recipient of the Padma Shri, is presently Advisor, Law, Human Rights and Responsibilities, Corporate Affairs. Former positions held by him include Director General of the Central Reserve Police Force, Director of Central Bureau of Investigation, and Director General of the National Human Rights Commission. He served in the government in Moscow, USSR, and Sydney, Australia. Dr. Mohan Agashe, yet another recipient of Padma Shri, a psychiatrist by profession and acknowledged as one of the finest actor on stage and screen in India. He has also been awarded the Goethe Medallia in March 2004. On medical front, he was the founder, director, professor of Maharashtra Institute of Mental Health in Pune. Dr. Mallika Sarabhai, recipient of Padma Bhushan, is one of India's leading choreographers and dancers, creating and performing both classical and contemporary works. She completed her MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and doctorate in organizational behavior from Gujarat University. An activist for education and women's empowerment, she has been using her work for change. Mr. Paranjoy Thakurta, may I please invite him on stage, is an independent journalist and an educator. His work experience, spanning over 36 years, cuts across different media, print, radio, television, and documentary cinema. He is a writer, speaker, anchor, interviewer, teacher, and a commentator. Mr. Rakesh Khanna. Mr. Rakesh Khanna is the Additional Advocate General for State of Punjab in the Supreme Court of India. Since 1982, enrolled as an advocate with the Bar Council of Punjab and Haryana, Chandigarh. In 1990, enrolled with Bar Council of Delhi and was admitted to the membership of the Bar Association of the High Court of Delhi and Bar Association of Supreme Court of India. He travelled extensively to almost all continents in respect of his corporate practices. Dr. Urvashi Butalia, recipient of Padma Shri, is a feminist publisher and a writer. She is co-founder of Kali for Women, India's first feminist publishing house, and now runs Zuban, an imprint of Kali. She has a long involvement in women's movement in India and writes widely on issues related to women and gender. Last but definitely not the least, without whom a panel discussion cannot really take place, is Dr. Kunal Sarkar. Apart from being an eminent doctor that we all know, he is an avid debater and a founder member of Calcutta Debating Circle and Kolkata Shukriti Foundation. I will now pass it on to Dr. Kunal Sarkar. It's all yours now. Thank you.
Good evening to all of you. I've just survived the last 2 hours in the company of 7 politicians, and what it does to your voice and faculties above that is truly fascinating. But I think I have survived the arduous test. You see, we in Calcutta, for the good part of the last century and a half, has not really had luck on our side. We've really not been a very lucky race. But where we sit today is one of the few sort of monuments to good fortune when Bengal and Calcutta got a little bit lucky. I think Joyantada will bear me out because when Lord Curzon made the plans for Victoria Memorial, it was 1906, when we still used to be the capital of the British colonial India. But by the time it finished, we were not the capital anymore. And this was an awful lot of marble to carry from Calcutta to Delhi. And considering the transport mechanism and the courier services not being that efficient in that day and age, that this monument was not dismantled from Calcutta and kept here ever since. So we got lucky just for once. We must acknowledge the contribution made by the Goethe-Institut in participating and facilitating such fora in our city. And especially, it marks a man who in 18th century was one of the most all-round personalities of Europe you could think about, starting from being a polymath, a visionary, a statesman, a writer. He wrote about light. His Faust has been set to music probably 100 times. And it's perhaps besides this forum today, my memory tells me that Wolfgang Goethe also did nibble with some erotic literature at some time or the other. That's perhaps besides the point. Now, it's not my place to sort of fill up the time, but give you a broad structure. There is nothing terribly intelligent with it. And being in Calcutta, we shall not attempt to be terribly intelligent. We haven't been so, at least in a good part of last few years. So we'll keep simple things simple. So we'll have a round in which our panelists will have a kind of a prod, a leading question from me. And you'll have all of kind of 4 minutes to deliberate on that. And obviously and inevitably there is going to be some overlap, but please react to the prods in a favorable way. They will not be something very violent by any means. So by which account we should have covered a kind of spectrum that perhaps we set out to discuss. So at the end of the 4 minutes, we'll have a round of about, say, around 2 minutes each, where each one of you can react to what has been already said. It may be your point or maybe somebody else's. It can be contradictions, it can be support. as long as it is not violent and does not start resembling the West Bengal Assembly, we are okay. Now, we have, keeping time with me, Shormishta, who did such an elegant job with the announcements. And just to make things very inaudible, she has not been given a bell. So I think she will use some method of communication, very subtle, very non-intimidating, to tell us that the allocated times are over.
Like, it's time.
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 I think the pitch may rise as the evening goes on. Now, who better to kick off today's discussion? And don't mind me being a little provocative at the beginning of it, because we'll have Ankita telling us. Because mind you, the way I see the motion today, we have violence on women at one side of it, and we do have the media on the other. So somewhere in our thoughts, in our deliberations, these two entities will perhaps be linked, or has to be linked to and be made relevant to one another. So Ankita, thanks for flying in from the capital of this great country and visiting this outpost, which is not very popular this day and age. We've made most of being financially relevant, and of late we have become politically relevant. But anyway, I'm told happy days are coming. I don't know in what shape or form. How do you kind of consign to the idea? We love your programs, we like NDTV through their political commentary, through your social commentary. But if I hit the remote button a few channels onwards, I'm led to one of your sister channels who's showing, sort of provocative, uncensored fashion from about 10, 11 o'clock onwards. How does the media today, as a service to women, live with this Jekyll and Hyde kind of existence?
That's a very interesting question, Dr. Sarkar, and I think a very good point to begin this discussion on. And I think it's fair to say that most media channels have a dual entity. And I'd like to actually talk more about the news media rather than our entertainment counterparts, because ideally those questions would be better addressed by them. I think even in terms of the news media, there are many questions that we need to ask ourselves about our coverage of violence against women. And I think I would prefer to sort of begin, or rather kick off this discussion talking about that. And indeed, we can always revisit the idea of the commodification of the women's body and the way in which it's done in the popular media. That's something that's likely to be taken up time and again. But just to begin, and since I've been part of the news business now for 12 or 13 years, and I opened the newspaper this morning, and the details of the Badayu case leapt up at me. And I'd like to just begin the discussion talking about that, because this is something that we as television channels dealt with extensively, if not as much as the Nirbhaya gang rape case, which was another case of sexual violence against women. Possibly this got maybe, a lot of time, perhaps second only to the Nirbhaya case. And it was an image that we're unlikely to forget. Two girls strung up on a mango tree in a sleepy village in Uttar Pradesh, and an ever-increasing crowd gawking at them, gawking at that horrific sight. The facts of the case were simple enough. Two teenagers, 14 and 16, apparently went out into the field to relieve themselves. They went missing. Their families contacted the police. The police refused to search for them. The next morning, the entire village was confronted with this gruesome sight. It didn't take long to conclude that the girls had been gang raped, murdered. The state police was then accused of shielding the rapists. The girls were from an OBC community, the Mauryas. The theory was that there was a powerful Yadav family in the village that were the perpetrators of the crime, and the police was not acting against them because they formed part of the community that is a core vote bank of the state's ruling party. The CBI took over that case, and 5 months later, they have now concluded this was not gang rape, this was not murder. It was not even an honor killing, which is another theory that was propounded in between. They've decided this was suicide. It's here in the fault lines of this Badayu case that I'd like to posit my argument about the role of the news media and its coverage of women, because we got a lot of things very wrong. And I say this as a media practitioner, not just our channel, but I think all the channels got a lot of things very badly wrong. The image itself, the grotesque, gruesome image of the bodies of two girls hanging from a tree that played in this sort of endless, macabre loop across news channels. Rules governing the reportage of sexual violence were ignored, perhaps a lot more than they were in the Nirbhaya case. Did the media attention actually bring the families closer to justice, or did all that immediate hysteria and the noise surrounding the reportage of this case actually take us further away from the truth? Those are sort of uncomfortable questions that we need to ask ourselves as media practitioners now. But having said that, I'd also like to argue that those images perhaps somewhere served a purpose. Gruesome as they were, they kind of jolted us from perhaps complacency, perhaps a desensitization that has been a hallmark of a lot of our reportage following the Nirbhaya gang rape case, simply because there has been this compelling attention, almost overwhelming attention to cases of sexual violence and indeed violence against women.
Time.
But I'd just like to say that, the facts are simple, but there are lots of unanswered questions. Why would two minor girls aged 14 and 16 kill themselves? How could they lasso themselves onto a tree and leave their slippers neatly below? There were jeep and tire marks right there. The CBI now claims there were 250 cell phone calls made from the phones of one of the girls to somebody who had initially confessed to the crime. Why was that confession then ignored? Those are the questions that the media now has to highlight. Those are the questions that we now have to go after. There is a chance here for us perhaps to at least seek remedial justice and to keep asking those questions, bring them up in the courts, and pursue this case to its logical conclusion. I'm afraid there is very little time at this moment, but I just want to make one further point, which is that the Nirbhaya case was certainly a watershed in the way in which the media reported violence against women, sexual violence in particular. It resulted in a lot of changes around the country, changes in legislation, the police fast-tracking cases. But perhaps the biggest, in my mind, the biggest, most important watershed of the Nirbhaya case was the way in which mindsets perhaps changed. And that's something that's open to debate, of course. But shame had been a debilitating factor when it came to speaking out about violence. This is a country where panchayats ask women to marry their rapists, because otherwise, they're the vehicle of shame that nobody wants to look at. This is a society where people refuse to speak out about sexual harassment or violence because they think it could harm their marriage prospects. But I think what the Nirbhaya case did, and that's something that we can attribute to the media, but also to Nirbhaya herself, the fearless one who not just fought back against her attackers, but also fought death to record her testimony, to make sure that her attackers were brought to book. And I think the media had a role to play in creating a space where protests were possible, where silence was no longer an answer. And I think that perhaps is one big takeaway. So I'm just going to sort of leave these out there as initial explorations of ways in which perhaps the media has helped us talk about violence against women better. And I'm sure as this discussion progresses, we can come back and revisit some of these points, and I can make...
cannot resist asking you
Yes.
a question. Since you all have seen everything evolve and enacted at such a close hand distance, were you really satisfied with the intensity, the depth and dimension of the investigations that follow? The police, etc., the investigations that follow. Are you convinced?
About this particular case?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. We're talking about two sets of investigations here with completely different findings. We had the state police that concluded that it was gang rape and murder, and yet did not act against the so-called accused for initially at least the first week or so. We had the family actually insisting on a CBI case. The CBI then took over the case, and 5 months later, apparently on the basis of 40 quote-unquote scientific reports, they have concluded that this was not gang rape, this was not murder. But the point is, 2 girls died. And did they lasso themselves to a tree? It was a 7-foot tall tree. There's been talk of an honor killing or at least an assisted killing. Are we to believe that it was societal pressure that brought about their deaths? If one girl was in a relationship, what about the other one? Why did she commit suicide? I think this case throws up a lot of problems for us, a lot of questions. And that's why it's so deeply unsatisfying and it's so troubling. And we've certainly made mistakes in our reportage of the cases, but I think this is perhaps the time when we can seek remedial justice and perhaps atone for some of the problems that we initially created.
I mean, can we just take on the continuity to Mr. Kaarthikeyan? Sir, in your experience, you've had obviously more than ample experience with the police, the justice, everything. I mean, in summary, do we think that our social justice system is anywhere empowered at the moment to take the social concern forwards with mature, unbiased investigation? Do we think we are empowered for that, or you're still, kind of vulnerable to all kind of factors?
Where I won't say that the system is perfect. Neither the laws nor the procedures, nor the court procedures are sufficient to do justice. That is known now. There are so many reports of the Law Commission. There are many judgments of the Supreme Court. Law reforms are on the way. There are many proposals pending before the Parliament. That apart, I would say that in such cases, is all over the world. Coming to this particular subject of the injustice done to the women, violence against women, trafficking of the children and all that, I mean, that is no excuse. That is so all over the world. Even in America, the FBI has reported how the media, the way the media is projecting things, actually are desensitizing the people concerned. And many world organizations, UNESCO, all say that there is just absolutely need for a sort of a reawakening, realizing on the part of the media, of all types of media, the way they report such instances. Yes, the truth has to be brought out. Now, Ankita asked questions on this case. Legitimate questions. They should be asked. That is the duty of the media. Because it is the media which can keep the governance on the right track. And also the investigations. Now, for example, the questions she raised, certainly they will be raised by the court when the final report is submitted. In this case, particular case, there is a duty and the right on the part of the magistrate before accepting it, because these questions will be asked, and then the CBI has to satisfy the court why they came to the conclusion. For example, in Urvashi murder case, the CBI filed the final report telling there is no evidence, close the case. That is the day the media asked me, what do you say? I have not read the final report of the CBI, but what appeared in the newspapers. I spoke to the director of CBI, I spoke to the officers concerned. They said, there were 2 views in the organization. Some said we'll close the case, others said we'll file the charge sheet. In any case, we may not have evidence. So he said, I took the decision to close the case. But then I told the media also, I told the director, I'm going to say, on the basis of the evidence you have presented in the final report of closure, I feel there is enough material to charge them at least for causing disappearance of evidence. See, the matter is pending, so we can't go more into the matter. So, but what happened was, this is what my view was. 2 weeks later, the trial judge held the same thing. He said, in the closure report itself, we have given enough evidence to show that they are involved. Not only for disappearance of evidence, he said even charged them for murder. And they were charged for murder, though they went to the High Court, Supreme Court and all that, still now they are standing trial for the charge of murder. So what I'm saying is, the CBI On the basis of whatever they could find, is a scientific report, they have to go on scientific report, they are going to question it. On other evidence, they come to a conclusion, either they are not able to detect the case, or they have got enough reason to believe that they committed suicide. Why they committed suicide? That's also a question. Obviously, they are put to some dishonor. That's also there. That matter has to be pursued. So, this is not the end of the matter. CBI coming to the conclusion that there is no evidence. All these questions will be naturally they would have gone through also. Because the court, ultimately the trial court will question, all these questions will be asked, and then the CBI has to say.
But you are fairly convinced with the methodology. And
methodology, you see, there is always scope for improvement. There is no called perfection. Is only, I was telling you to start with, there is a need for a lot of changes. There is not a forum to discuss that. The laws are defective, substantive laws are defective.
Have that been initiated?
Evidence is defective, procedure is defective. We have to do lots of things. The wholesale reformation of the criminal justice system is required to make it perfect. It is not perfect today.
Did you have a burning point?
Yes, but this can wait till the interjection.
Sure. I think we will. Can I just throw it over to Paranjoy? Paranjoy, you've probably seen from more than proximity that what's been happening, and the threshold for reporting, the threshold for reacting has, as we feel and we see it, vastly changed. As Ankita also said, over the last few years. How do you think it is, are we barking more on sensationalism, or we are really pursuing the substance of social justice out over here?
Dr. Babu, let me suggest that the topic itself is not new. Violence against women has been there for a very, very long time. Much of it takes place behind closed doors, and much of it we don't get to know. The media has been sensationalized for donkey's years, ever since the media exists. Good news is no news. Bad news is good news. You know that. If dog bites man, it's not news. If man bites dog, it becomes news. Unless dog bites Sonia Gandhi, Aishwarya Rai, Narendra Modi, then it becomes newsworthy all over again.
God forbid.
The issues, let me try and situate the issue, and let's discuss is there something different? Is there something new? When we look at this part of the world, South Asia, we have no doubt of very, very powerful women leaders. In our own country, we've had Mrs. Indira Gandhi, her daughter-in-law. In Pakistan, we have Benazir Bhutto. In Bangladesh, we have Sheikh Hasina, Khaleda Zia. In Sri Lanka, we have Sirimavo Bandaranaike. She was Prime Minister 3 times. Her daughter, Chandrika Kumaratunga. Not very far in Myanmar, we have Aung San Suu Kyi as one of the tallest political leaders. Yet, this is the irony that despite the fact that perhaps more than many parts of the world, maybe with the exception of Europe, we've had very, very important tall women holding political power, holding positions of power and influence and authority. Has that changed the situation on the ground? Answer, no. We are discussing the Badayu case, and it's rare that we are discussing a case about 2 women in a fairly remote part of this country. But the situation is indeed changing. In the case of Nirbhaya in Delhi, December 2012, why is that the gang rape of a young woman brought hundreds and hundreds of people out on the streets of the capital? And the utter stupidity of those who were in positions of power in that point of time to use water cannons on a bunch of young boys and girls who were lighting candles, and young men and women who'd come out on the streets. Somewhere along the line, you have a tipping point. And that's what happened. So Nirbhaya, if I mention her name and I know her name, if I mention it, I will be violating the law of the land. But her name was published in the United Kingdom in the website. Her father wanted her name to be known when the government was thinking of instituting various schemes after her. Instead of using a name given to her by the Times of India. But again, it's a very, very curious law that we have in our country where we are not allowed to disclose her name legally. But at the same time, what we are also seeing There are women and there are women. Sometimes women also become their own enemies, and this also gets reflected in the media. The problem with the media, and there is the media and there is the media, is that at least in India, and I speak for India, there's complete regulatory anarchy and chaos. So you can have pornography at 3 o'clock or something close to pornography. You have a dozen agencies, government, non-government, self-regulatory, which are ostensibly aimed at policing the media. This is the India where the Central Board of Film Certification allowed for the first time full frontal nudity after a judge said, yes, you can. I'm talking about Bandit Queen. I'm talking about 1996. And this is the same country where not very long ago, 25 or 30 years ago, men and women didn't kiss. You know, they would come very close to each other, then two flowers would touch and two birds would come. Time. All right. One more minute.
Sure.
Now, women and men are protesting on the streets and kissing lip to lip. There are changes. You could argue that the change is very, very slow. You can argue that what's happening in India is happening across the world. There's somebody called Kim Kardashian, whatever her name is. Oh, yes, that's right. She's making news for all the wrong reasons. She was there in a birthday suit and everybody was looking at her. So we suggested that you please wear your earrings some of the time, but she was just in a birthday suit. Things are changing. Gauri Shinde put out an advertisement for Tanishq, the jeweler, where for the first time you saw a woman with a child from a previous relationship getting married. There are changes. It's very, very slow. You can say excruciating slow. We live in a country where the Prime Minister's wife applied under the Right to Information Act about what were her rights. It's not very far from here, sir. 1 kilometer away, barely a kilometer away. February 2012, there were 3 women. Mamata Banerjee, Honorable Chief Minister of the state. Damayanti Sen, police officer who was transferred. And Suzette Jordan, I can name her, because she's one of the few people who underwent the kind of experience that she did and says, I don't want to be known as the Park Street rape case woman. I am Suzette Jordan. So we salute her, and I'm sure there will be more and more changes. Yes, the changes that are happening at an excruciatingly slow pace. I would go along with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paranjoy. Actually, it's kind of a funny observation that feudal societies have always churned up female leaders. I don't know why. It's almost historically true over the last 200 years, and probably feudal societies who do not respect women at home has practiced the art of deification of women almost to perfection. Perhaps we are linked somewhere by the subconscious. We at this stage would have some more insight from Dr. Mohan Agashe that in all the awareness, in all the sort of reporting, media, law, confrontations, do you get a hint anywhere in the roots of society? In Bengal, we don't use the expression grassroots anymore. We are a bit allergic to it. But anyway, in the roots of society, do you feel as if that the earth is shifting, the psychology, our awareness towards this thing is really being affected, or not really?
Well, I'll focus on since the issue is media and violence against women, the general portrayal of women in the media and news. What I have found out lately for many reasons is earlier the conditioned thinking was film was a fiction and news was real. Right? Now gradually we are changing. The news seems to be more fictitious than the art cinema, which is much more realistic. How this change has come, I mean, I've done few films. Unfortunately, many of these films about women have been made by male filmmakers, like Jabbar Patel's Umberta or Mrutyudand, one exception, Rihai by Aruna Raje. In most of these films, I have played a bad guy, but bad guys are generally very good in real life, as you know. Right? So this is very intriguing, and it is very important that how these women are projected in the media. To me, that becomes fundamental question in country like India, where large percentage of population is not cognitively developed. On the large, we are still an emotional society and not a cognitive society. I have definite reasons. I mean, impeachment proceedings in United States can happen, right, without any violence. If something like that was to happen in India, they would have burned the parliament. So that's why I say our primary reactions are very emotional. And now what happens? So that is why in West Asian and Indian populace is more rooted in sensory perceptions, which goes with image and sounds, rather than words, right? And the conventional, I'll say, pet media stereotypes, timelessly hypocritical, celluloid role models still come in the form of sindoor-smeared mothers and sisters packages. A lady is either a goddess or a vamp, strictly a binary characterization. Come what may, woman's rightful place is home and particularly the kitchen. Waiting and worshipping for husband is still woman's principal duty and litmus test of life. Working woman's life is designed for failure. It's only when she gets back home she is truly blessed. Rape happens only because women cross the line. Housewives are still nagging and the prime reason why husbands look elsewhere. A fair complexion is still sought for. Dark-skinned people are yet an object of ridicule. These are typical stereotype portrayals in the mainstream cinema. The names which I took are not mainstream, are exception. Now, when you have these kind of images coming onto you all the time, right, it is bound to create something, some different concepts and a behavior. And the last point before I finish my time, I think I have some. Now we have to seriously think and look at the change of sequence in our life, which I was talking to Apida, I think. See, when I was growing up, at least, and I didn't have to go to school, the media was not rampant, the information explosion wasn't there. So what were my source of information? Primary source of information were parents, then family members, then when I go to school, then teachers, peers. So by the time I have more information or adequate information, I had a lot of experience of life. So I analyzed information on the basis of my experience. Whereas now information is so much and so early without any experience. And especially because this media is without any control, the kind of images you have, somebody made reference to porno, what kind of impact it's going to have in a feudal society where sex was more tabooed than emotions. So media becomes very, very important in current day, the way they project. It's like a double-edged weapon. It's like a knife. You can stab with it or you can do surgery. So it's time for media to do surgery with that knife.
So your point about the information explosion is well said. But even, when we were carving exquisite statues on sandstone, how do you explain the coexistence of obscenity and religion? That's almost been a historical habit. So that was completely unrelated to your exposure on information and the bolus of it. It almost seems to be embedded somewhere in the human genome. Is it fair to make that comment?
Your use of the word obscenity is a big question mark.
That's right, yeah.
My apologies, yes.
I was going to say the same thing.
Sure.
Using it unproblematically using obscenities.
Now, you have to look at the time span in which this came. What was the state of affairs in India? It was highly developed, highly sophisticated, and much more educated then, in those terms, than it is today, I think. And that is why now the situation is reverse, right, than that time. So that is why I said what you call, and these references are always given, they were taught as growing up process, how to see things, what to see, how to listen, what to listen. And that brings my next point. Now, ever since printing came, the focus of education has shifted to reading and writing. So those who read and write know there is no attention paid to seeing and listening, which was a part of growing up that time.
Well, I'm told in Finland they've given up handwriting totally. That's right. Isn't it? They say it's not required anymore. So handwriting has been made obsolete from this.
But that's fine.
That's an observation. Yeah. Could we invite reactions from Urvashi, Butalia, that in the view of these observations, with your experience and your work in the domain of feminism, the way you would like to describe, what is the current status and what is the direction you're heading for?
Well, if you're placing me here as a representative of the women's movement in India, I'll happily accept that responsibility, even though it may not be something that activists might impose on me. You know, I want to say a few things. One is 20 or 25 years ago, you would not have had a discussion like this on a public platform in which men and women, and fairly senior men and women, were talking about the subject of women in media. For one thing, if the equivalent of Shukriti, Kolkata Shukriti, had invited the people like Dr. Kaarthikeyan, Dr. Agashe, Paranjoy, etc., to a discussion like this, they would not have come. They would have thought, what is this rubbish? Why should we go and talk about women? So I think that is a change we have to note. I think the relationship between women, the women's movement and media on issues of violence against women particularly, has been a very interesting, fairly complex, at times contentious and combative, at times supportive relationship. For example, we would not have got the changes that the women's movement got in 1983 in the rape and dowry laws had it not been for the support of the media at that time. The letter that the four lawyers wrote, which led to the opening up of the Mathura rape case, was publicized by newspapers at a time when there was no internet, and we would not have got that. At the same time, there is a way in which the media are extremely selective in what they choose to report on, and that selectivity front ends the question of violence against women of only certain kinds. We are talking about the Nirbhaya case. The media willfully do not see other kinds of rape, for example, caste rape, because it is so naturalized in our society. Today's report in the papers talks about 1 in every 4 Indians still believe strongly in caste and practices untouchability in their homes. The most touchable of all is the Dalit woman, whose body is available to everybody. And somehow that never gets the kind of attention it needs. The other thing that the media invisibilize is army rape, which is tied in with nationalism and which is tied in with the media's problems of getting the kind of handouts that they get from the army and from the government. So it places media people in a very awkward kind of situation. The other thing that the media find difficult to talk about, do not necessarily invisibilize willfully, is the fact of the massive amount of violence against women that takes place inside the family, inside the private space, because that space is extremely difficult to access, and also because it is not sexy and it does not make news to report those kinds of non-public performances of violence. So I think there are, on the one hand, all of those things that are important to note. On the other hand, I think there is also the fact that the women's movement for the longest time has been consistently addressing the issue of violence against women, pointing to its many complex forms in our society, pointing to the ways in which it intersects with other forms of inequality and political development, such as globalization, the new kinds of jobs, the move from rural to urban, the aspirations of the new middle class, all of this leading to an increase, say, in urban violence, which is something we did not see as much of 25 years ago, because the shape of cities was different. And the media do not pay enough attention to that. And I'm not doing this as a blame game, but I think there is a problem. What do you do? Do you report? Do you analyze? Can you do both? And then when we talk of the media, we pay attention really only to news, which if ratings are to be believed, and just before we came in here, we were having this discussion about how bad the method of collecting statistics on media is. But if we're looking at that, we tend to focus only on news. But films, which was addressed by Sharmishta when she introduced the session, and also the entertainment programs that take place on our television, may not have overt violence, but are deeply violent in their thinking towards women. And those are things that we need to address. As a feminist, I'm very hopeful that even these small changes that are happening, and some of those are due to the presence of larger numbers of women in the media, will eventually lead to the kind of change we are seeking. So I am not as dismal as many of the presentations that have been made, because I know I can see the successes that we have had in the long battle that we fought. Thank you.
The note of optimism is very welcome, but do you think it spans across the rural-urban divide?
No, I don't necessarily think it spans across the rural-urban divide. I'm glad you asked that question, because when I was speaking of really, within quotes, a more mainstream urban activist who has been involved in it. But I think the activism spans across. I think the note of hope may not.
We live in hope. Mr. Khanna, I think your work describes you of having experience in the northern part of the country, in Punjab. And if I may say so, it is that part of the country which is a huge note of worry as far as gender distribution in India is concerned. It is looking at that part of the country where I think sometime in the 70s that Professor Amartya Sen, of all people, made one of his seminal publications in the British Medical Journal, where the disparity, the gender disparity of North India, the sex determination and all this business was pointed out. Do you think that over the last, say, decade or so, that we've really made some progress? Because that is a burning problem in a part of the country. And we've had all sorts of rules. And I'll tell you that some of the rules to do with ultrasound investigations, PNDT and stuff like that, they are so harsh that it is difficult for us. There are thousands of people out in the countryside with heart valve problem, with heart diseases. We go out to the countryside for cardiac camps, but we cannot diagnose, we cannot take ultrasound machines out with us to diagnose those people who are suffering, the young boys and girls with heart disease anymore, because there is a PNDT clamp on this, yes, for a good purpose. But it is one of the situations, where perhaps at times we throw the baby out with the bathwater. So it's a conflicting situation at this point of time. And especially, I think some of the states where the activism and the results of activism has got stuck is in that particular belt of the country, where I believe we are short of some, it's a very quantitative expression to use. I believe we are short of 30 million women. That's the level of gender disparity at the moment. So please fill us up with your experience from that part of the country, because it remains a tremendous source of worry.
If I may talk not only of Punjab, I would take this up all in the northern belt. Haryana topmost, followed by Punjab, and then spread all over north. Delhi itself, the NCR itself is very disturbing. The only thing that has happened is that instead of using the traditional method of suffocating the foetus, today advanced medical machines are being used for that. On the ground, a lot of work has been done. Unfortunately, we have a very strong position of the cops, which have kept actual activism or actual help away from those people who really require to be tutored that something like this is not done in a society like this. If you go on statistics, it's always rising. I don't want to give a figure of 32%, 40%, 50%. The question is, the more disturbing fact is, how do we control this? Unless and until the education, the literacy rate, the thinking starts right from your childhood, I don't see this problem going or even reducing. I don't see this problem reducing, because even today in those villages, even today in the urban area, in Delhi, they still think that having a girl child is a burden. And one of the reasons, in fact, Supreme Court in a judgment said that one of the main reasons for killing the child in the mother's womb is Dowry Act. And in spite of Dowry Prohibition Act coming into, things have not changed. So it is not the legal perspective at the moment we are worried about. It's not the law that are there. At the end of it, it all amounts to a murder, and they all know about it. But the fact is, they are all protected. There is a whole village khaap system in Haryana, in Punjab. We have incidented in Tamil Nadu. We have instances from Tamil Nadu. As far as Tamil Nadu, there is a khaap system there. So it's spread out. So it's in the mind, it's in the culture.
Can I interrupt you? Could you just explain? Some of us may not know what is a khaap system. How does it work?
You know, the word khaap is actually very localized to the north, and it actually means a panchayat, a body of elders getting together to kind of act as parallel courts where they would settle local disputes, law, in spite of the law being there. According to us, it is an illegal organization. They can be advisory khaaps, they can be advisory panchayats. They are kind of unelected panchayat system, where the elders of the family would decide, elders of the village would decide what they need to do for a particular offense that has happened. For example, if we have had honor killings, we have a very sad incident which happened about, let's say, last month, where this Yadav girl, she was killed by her own parents because she dared to marry outside her own caste. Now, these are all coming out of the same perception. We do not want the girl child to have an independent thought process in those areas so that they can actually think and lead the lives they want. They need to live for the family, they need to live for the commitments of the family, they need to live for the honor of the family. And this starts right from the day, if they ever find out that the child is a girl. The first discrimination is the moment the doctor says it's a girl. That's where it starts. And it doesn't end. It goes up because that's the way they are treated there. That's the way North believes about them. And it's sad. Figures, I have lots of figures which I can put on the table, but do they really mean anything if that work that needs to be done in that urban area is not done? It is not going to improve, sir.
How much of it is an economical problem? How much of it is an educational problem? I mean, where do we intervene?
Economical, I don't think it is an economical problem, sir. It's not at all an economical problem. It's a problem with the feudal system. It's a big problem with the feudal system, which refuses to go out. They still think that the girl needs to be either a housewife or submersive, or she needs to be traded, or it's absolutely different thinking, which it's very difficult to put in words. Economics has nothing to do with that. It's not at all economic. There are families who are billionaires, I'm a millionaire, whatever you want to call them, who still indulge in this. And economics is not going to change in it. It is the way the education system and the whole system of that area needs to be changed. It's not one family. There are people who need to go down there. We have this district near Gurgaon. Gurgaon is, let's say, about 20 kilometers on out of Delhi, and this Mewat district is another 10 kilometers from there. There, even today, they don't send that girl to school. The ratio is 879 to 1,000. They get brides from outside. It's so badly imbibed into this whole system that it's difficult to take out. It would, if I may say so, it is going to take some decades to actually throw it out, or even a century.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Worrying times. Just made me think that since Achhe has come over the whole country, whether this is going to make an impact on any of this happening. Time will tell. We go to Miss Jani. From what we've heard about the problems, the violence and all this aspect, how do you put your social entrepreneurship in perspective?
So when I first came to India from the US 15 years ago, and I started my first business, one of my customers told me once something on the phone. He said, Bhairavi, the problem is that everything is great working with you, but tumko gali nahi de sakte. I cannot give you a gali. So I said, the thing is, Mr. Chara, I must assure you that the Constitution of India gives equal freedom of expression to you and me both. So compatriot, please give me galis, because be assured I shall give you 2 back. I think it's extremely important for women to realize themselves, and for women entrepreneurs to realize themselves, who like to work in an ecosystem of trying to get benefit because they are women, is that you are not weak, or you are not at any handicap. You are only at a handicap or what you give yourself as a negative mark in the first place. 154 billion is the borrowing women do in this country. 136 billion out of that is borrowed from unorganized sectors. Abuse that we are talking about, violence against women that we are talking about, as we heard other panelists mention, is not just limited to rape. In fact, the most expensive war ever fought in the world is the war that is waged on women through domestic violence at home. That includes marital rape, that includes abuse, that includes psychological abuse, that includes economical abuse, and many more categories, as you may add. The value, the economic value of that war is 5.4% of global GDP. Trillions, more than $4 trillion US. So for all those people who like to do a quick calculating math about how much women matter, in a very raw, very objective sense, this is what the trouble that you are creating in the global society. So when you go back to entrepreneurship and you look at how do you solve a problem of 4.3 trillion US, this is the gap. Why is it a gap? Because as we looked at it, $154 billion in India alone is what women borrow, but 136 out of that is borrowed through an organized and informal sector, which means we haven't created a financial ecosystem for women entrepreneurs to borrow money. This is just one point in case. You cannot, just like terrorism, you cannot just keep the blame on media, keep the blame on police, keep the blame on the justice system. It is an entire ecosystem that breeds a terrorist. Similarly, it is an entire ecosystem that breeds violence against women. Unless and until we are prepared as a society to handle each one of those pieces of the ecosystem, do our part in solving them, role of media will always be limited to putting the buck on whoever is the weak goat that time. Now, I'm very happy to hang people, but hanging people, just because that seemed to be the most plausible candidate at that point in time to put the blame on, is a very quick fix to a solution. And quick fix is not something that we should be interested in, considering we've been around for about 10,000 years as a civilization. So if we are interested in a permanent and a long-term solution to this process, first and foremost, we have to recognize that women are not person non grata, not including them in the country's manufacturing policy, which is a 100-page of document with no mention of women in manufacturing, not mentioning how, I mean, look around, please. Women are running this country. I'm very sorry to inform all you men here. They work in the agriculture fields because men don't come anymore. They work in dairy, they run the homes. Because they work in largely service and unorganized sector, you are not capturing their contribution in the nation's accounting, and that is the first and the foremost disservice you are doing to them. Organized entrepreneurship is way far away. First and foremost, we must recognize the contribution of women in nation's accounting. We must create an ecosystem that strengthens her financially. While she's working hard to become financially self-reliant, we must not create systems of borrowing that makes her even more vulnerable than strong. We must not find a weak goat every single time to make a bakra out of, whether it's media, police, or the justice system, but collectively understand that every piece of society creates the situation that the woman is on, and that may be the beginning of fixing this 5.4, trillions of dollars worth of problem that the world is facing today. And I'm very optimistic that we can do it in this country.
Thank you. I think that number almost adds up to probably 60% of India's GDP or something like that. Quite imposing figures. Now, Mallika, how do you react if we say that, look, it is not a nation-specific issue. It's not a region-specific issue. It's actually a globalized problem. And as a part of a globalized society, you can catch a virus or two, you can have a problem or two. So what we are seeing in Indian society today, are we overreacting to it? Because probably in some size, shape or color it exists throughout the world.
There are many things that exist all over the world which need to still be sorted out.
Sure.
And this is one of them. So it doesn't matter whether it happens all over the world, it still needs attention. I want to just, in view of all of this, share two things with this audience. Some time ago, as part of my work in trying to change attitudes and as part of my work as a communicator using the arts to change attitudes about violence and the understanding of violence against women, addressed 50,000 young people over a 15-day period in 50 institutions in Ahmedabad. And I would go into the institutions and I would look around and I would say to the girls, can you raise your hands, any of you who have been abused? Now, this was about 6 months after the Nirbhaya case. No hands raised. Then I would say, have any of you been subjected to somebody going when you're walking by or whistling? 100% up. Then I would say, have any of you had roving hands find your body when you didn't want it to? 100% up. Have any of you felt threatened when you are passing a group of boys and try to avoid that or cross the street? 100% hands up. And I said, if this is not abuse, what is it? The media, in talking only of violent rape, has gone into the general expectation of Indian society that all of this is okay, girls must put up with this because boys will be boys. That's how things are. And girls have internalized it to such an extent that they impose a self-censorship in saying, if we count all of this, we wouldn't even be able to survive sanely. And therefore, let's not even think about it. Let's not feel upset or violated when somebody suddenly puts their hand on your bum or your breast. Let's not, because if I do, I will lose my sanity. That's one. The second is that just as Mohan said that media is a double-edged sword, thank God it is, because for all that media does to, on the one side, trivialize molestation by calling it stupid things like Eve teasing. It's first of all, Eve, why Eve? Secondly, why teasing? Because nobody thinks it's funny, least of all the girl. But while media does this, social media also has the power to empower the whole movement. And I want to bring to your attention one amazing thing that's been happening for the last 3 years, America-based but global, called the Misrepresentation Project. I don't know how many of you know it. There was a study in America 3 years ago, and young girls in school said they have no serious role models in the media, in films, in television. Who do we be like except Barbie, they said. And a group of feminist media workers made a film called Misrepresentation. And this has started as a forum. And by garnering people like you who are concerned about this but don't know what to do, they have had Nike change their advertisement. They have had 8 major companies, including IT companies, change their advertisements, change the whole campaign because it is gender insensitive. They have managed to bring to the notice people films that are gender insensitive. Films have had to be pulled out of theaters. And this is the power of social media and of people who are concerned getting together and moving out of their butts and actually picking up a pen or pressing a button on the internet. Now, this is also the power of media. So I think when we talk of the media, we need to be clever enough to be able to use the media. All of us who are insidiously feminists and within the media, like Ankita and many other women in journalism today, I think we need to find the space of how we can use it in a media environment which basically goes for paid advertising. I am done.
Time. Perfect.
Perfect. You deserve a prize for this. Yeah. Now we have a little bit of time in hand, not a lot of it. We just come round from this end of the table. And since Ankita spoke first, please share in a few minutes some of the reactions you would have gathered to what has been said so far. Yeah.
Right. I think I'd like to respond to some of the things Mallika said right away. And I briefly touched upon a point that I believed that post the Nirbhaya case, the media had at least created a small element of space. And by no means am I sort of trying to project this as a massive change or anything, that there was a small space for protest instead of the silence that had been imposed by societal pressures of caste, class, politics, gender, whatever you choose to call it. And we talked about Suzette Jordan, and I think it's important to come back to her because, we're sitting in Calcutta, we're not very far away from Park Street. And it was this space, perhaps, that probably facilitated someone like Suzette Jordan to speak out and say, not be the nameless, faceless rape victim anymore. Say that I'm tired of feeling ashamed. I'm tired of feeling afraid that I've been raped. My name is going to go out there. My face is going to be visible. It's a very interesting point you made about the young girls you spoke to in Ahmedabad, and I completely take your point about that. But I think little by little, perhaps this culture of silence is breaking, without going into the merits or demerits of, all the accusations or counterclaims that we've heard. The very fact that a young law intern decided to speak out against an esteemed judge who's perhaps known very well here in Calcutta. And I'm not going into the merits of the case at all. Just the fact that a law intern with her entire professional career in front of her felt empowered enough to speak out about sexual harassment, if we want to call it that. The fact that a junior journalist decided she could take on a mighty news editor. The media has actually been criticized a great deal for giving disproportionate time and space to the reportage of these stories. But I think what they did do was create an atmosphere or create an environment where critical debates could take place about sexual harassment in the workplace. And I think for that we need to be sort of thankful. And perhaps it's just the start of what could be.
Ankita, I'm also part of the media.
No, I completely agree. But I just wanted to
No, I think that's a very, very pertinent point. Any points from you, Bhairavi?
We have done just enough to raise the awareness and maybe bring the conversation mainstream. But media is not just news media. In fact, a large part of media is entertainment, the GEC sections. Large part of media is, for example, what happens through advertisement and connotations that go and contours that go when you advertise in a particular way. A large part of media is what we, see in our films, for example, today. And there is a very, very deep gap and a very shallow and narrow point of view with which the other aspect of non-news media looks at women. I mean, who goes to sleep wearing a Mangal Sutra and a Sindoor every night? I'd really like to know, And, to be very honest, they do not go and watch these serials because they relate to those women. Women watch these serials because they don't relate to these women. Because if I've had a 10-hour day of sending kids to school, cooking, having my husband sort of quibble at me after he's come home, dealing with all the things that I deal with in a day that even a homemaker woman in India ends up dealing with, I really don't want to see myself on TV at 9 p.m. I want to see another woman being put through a worse hell than me, the fictitious hell as maybe. And while she goes through that hell, she's all decked up, full on makeup, lipstick hair, Mangal Sutra hair. And, she even manages to move all these pieces in the house and play the role and break up all the family and create all the nuisance in society. Yeah? Sure. You are just feeding negativity by doing that. Forget stereotyping a woman. And that, having said that, there have been great shows like the Balika Vadhu that have used their reach in 100 countries today to put out social messages through the programs. But I just think it's such a lip service. And for a country of 1.25 billion people, if this is the limit of our creativity, I mean, we need to wake up and smell coffee.
Perhaps we will. Sir.
I should say that by and large, the media is playing a very positive role. Yes, certain incidents are highlighted because only through an incident you can create awareness about what is going wrong and what should be done to prevent it. But the worst form of exploitation, violence, is in the field of commercial sex trade. Trafficking of children and women for commercial sex industry. And they're all forced into it, either by the family or otherwise. The worst thing, it said about 2 million women are in commercial sex trade. It is a total exploitation. There cannot be a worse exploitation violence than what is happening in that. And what is the tragic is about 1 million children below 16 years of age. And according to a report, I want to quote, alarming trend is that the age of children trafficked into the commercial sex industry is decreasing year after year. See the perversion. The child has no body, no mind, nothing. It is forced into something which she doesn't understand. And before she knows what is happening, she is infested with the worst form of diseases. But why is it we are not talking about it? We are too ashamed to talk about it. Because we think it's impossible to deal with it. Maybe. That's the worst form of violence, worst form of exploitation, and we are all closing our eyes and simply as if nothing is happening. And another thing I want to tell is, immediately after independence, don't interrupt me now for a minute. Sure. You see, some members of parliament I am talking about. Sati, when the husband dies, the woman is supposed to jump into the funeral pyre because, there's a few members of parliament, I am talking about the real incident, called on a spiritual master. It's called Vedatri Maharishi. He used to live in a place called Temple of Consciousness in the Elephant Hills in Coimbatore. When he came here, they called on him. And with a proposal, telling, this is our tradition. This is our religion. These Britishers have tried to interfere with it. So this is the resolution we want to pass in the parliament. We want your blessings. He read it. They said that act should be rendered invalid. That is Sati. Sati should become legal again. And what he did was he went through it and he said, he has written also about it. And he said, I agree with you. Only one change. When the husband dies, wife should jump into the fire. When the wife dies, husband should jump into the fire. Then in which case I support it fully. That was the mindset of people who were member of parliament. So we have made a lot of progress. Nothing has happened. Lots of things are happening, but much more should happen. The media should, by and large, there are exceptions, they are everywhere. By and large, I should say the media is playing a positive role. They should focus on this worst form of exploitation because it's difficult to find a solution doesn't mean we should not talk about it.
Are there any special initiatives or programs which is looking at trafficking in particular?
On that, no, that's become controversial. So I wouldn't like to talk about it. If that is inevitable, there are steps to be taken like many other countries. Because she should have the right If she chooses the profession, she should have the total right on herself. He's being exploited.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I don't mind being a little. The woman has no choice. The woman or a girl, whoever is there, made to sleep with 10 people, 20 people in a day, whether she is sick or not. And even a pittance is all taken away by the media, middlemen. And middlemen, not media, middlemen. And of course, there is also corrupt officers are there also there. So at least the woman, if she is chosen to sell her body, she should have the full right to whom to sleep and what to make. At least, then you can subject them to medical examination. They will not become breeding ground of dangerous diseases. They become breeding ground because we want to be blind to what's happening there. It's very dangerous to the society. AIDS and so many other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Your thoughts?
I personally think that citizens need to take a very, very proactive role at all times. If you see an advertisement that is gender insensitive, like every insurance company always has the parents saving for the daughter's wedding, never for the daughter's education. If we can write to them, if we can write to the Advertising Council of India, take that time to do so. If you feel that there's something being misreported or reported badly in a television channel or a newspaper, take the time to send an email. I think that is the way to sensitize. If we think that somebody else out there is going to change the situation and we can go, oh, how horrible it is, oh, how bad it is, it's really terrible, it's not going to change. Each of us needs to understand that this is it decimates this country and this society in such a tragic way that unless each of us who is here and who feels concerned, because that's why you are here, unless each of us becomes genuinely active on a daily basis, and it is very tiring, I understand, but there's no other way out of it.
Quite true, quite true. Dr. Agashe.
The media magazines are very fond of taking interviews and asking you questions, what color you like, what is your date of birth and everything. And generally, one of the questions is, what would you like to be given a choice in the next birth? And my answer was woman. Because that's the only thing which I can't be in this birth. I could be prime minister, cricket player, whatever it is, right? Because I've experienced there is species-specific responses. And I do conclude that this is a species, woman, men. So like a text as a subtext, I kept on wondering if there were no men at all in the world. What would be the argument on the floor would be like? So, is there a subtext that what is happening is because of media, men, the way they are portrayed, we should complain and everything, or it also has to do with the inner education of the people. Sahishnutta, whether you get affected by it, not get affected by it. Or take danduka every time. So, this will be a perennial problem that when we have a knife, how to use the knife is the question, and that comes with the training. Because knife in itself, media in itself is very neutral. Right? Who uses the media, how they use the media is going to be of fundamental consequence hereafter, especially when we are very conscious of media. When there was no I remember my grandmother told me that my time the women were more, not intelligent, were wise. They were wise because they would know exactly where the weakness is. Right. And though not educated and everything, the first thing a woman would do after marriage is to be very quiet, not saying she was not allowed to say anything, right? But to see and everything. Ultimately, she would rule the family. Right. That was the situation. So we have to find the balance between with the media and conscious and unconscious processes, both.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Agashe, reminded me of the worst question a journalist can ask an interviewer, especially if he's a man. When did you stop beating your wife? On a less facetious note, I want to add to some of the points that he said, Dr. Butalia said, Dr. Sarabhai said. The media, indeed, we have to look at both media, fact and fiction. As you rightly pointed out, the divide between what is fact and what is fiction has got obliterated altogether. So what would you prefer to watch at 9 o'clock in the morning? 9 o'clock in the evening. Would you like to watch my friend Arnab Goswami Save the Nation, where you have 8 people in small boxes speaking simultaneously so you can't make out what anybody's saying? Or would you prefer to use that button and go on to mother-in-law emotionally blackmailing daughter-in-law? Which brings me to what Urvashi said. We have a highly flawed system of television ratings. It's a corrupt and easily manipulated system of rating, which is why the woman in particular is treated as a consumer to whom advertisers have to be brought closer to, and not as a person, as an individual, as a citizen to be empowered. I just want to add a few points to the aspects that have been pointed out. Dr. Agashe rightly said, the media is like that scalpel. In the hands of a skilled surgeon, it can remove a diseased part of your body, but it can also be used to murder and maim. As Dr. Butalia pointed out, there are many dimensions, and we can't separate patriarchy from the bigger, political, social, economic power relationship that exists in our society and across the world. Economics. Bhairavi Jain pointed out, yes, when women care for their children, for the elderly, when they do domestic work, that doesn't come into our calculation of gross domestic product. You're absolutely correct. So you asked this disconnect between economic development and social development. Why is it that the agriculturally most prosperous states in India, like Punjab and Haryana, have this kind of sex ratio? And the more appropriate word which you can take from Australia for a cup is a kangaroo court. But this is not all, because there is also another aspect of the economic aspect. I mean, which is the most widely selling cosmetic in India? Fair and Lovely, better known as Fair and Ugly, right? Now you have one for men as well. So it's not just, it's also connected with the deep, racism that exists in Indian society. And who produces it? One of the biggest multinational corporations in the world, Unilever. They control the levers of the universe, it used to be said. There used to be a time when newspaper advertisements used to talk about wanted wife with wheatish complexion. Did you ask what kind of wheat? Maida, atta, whatever. Last point, sir. There's also a religious aspect to it. We've talked a lot about love jihad. There is a group called Love Commandos in Meerut. They actually help men and young women who've sort of run away and got married against the wishes of their family. They actually protect them. They provide safe homes. We don't hear so much about them, because good news is no news. Bad news is good news. We hear about the love jihad first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Khanna.
I want to start this by bringing an incident which I happened to advise a client on. This lady, for 18 years of her married life, went through violence. After the Domestic Law Act was enacted, she came to my office and she says, I want to now fight my husband. She had a daughter who was, when she came to me, who was 17 years old, and she lived through sexual exploitation, beating, being forced to sleep with other men by her husband. A tragic story. I asked her this question. I said, why did you not come before? Today the courts are going to take a very different view of your having lived with this life. It is as if you were supporting to be in this life. She said, I did it for my daughter. Because every time I would oppose him, he would tell me, I'm going to kill your daughter. And I lived through this for 18 years. Now, why do I bring this incident here is a very simple reason. Media needs to play a role, and so has law to do, to give all these ladies the confidence to speak out, the confidence to understand that law has empowered them to speak out and reach for help. And one of the reasons the Domestic Violence Act was brought in, so that all this huge number of ladies, women going through hell for years for whatever reason, one of the reasons is to let the family stay together, should be brought out. There is not enough awareness for them to understand that they can get help, even after being in this kind of situation for 18, 20 years.
Time.
I just want to add, there's a very interesting point Mallika ji mentioned. She said we only talk about rape. Do we know that incest rape in this country, from the ratio of 2012 to 2013, rose by 46.8%. It's mind-boggling. After the Nirbhaya case was reported, 143 rapes in January and February. Suddenly we had 359 rapes in the next 3 months. So do I put this to the role of media, or do I put this to the role of awareness? Was media reporting negative? That the criminal mind then thought that this is going to make me famous, I got to do this, I'll be in news. Or was it to create a deterrent in law? These are big questions. And these questions need to be debated till we find an answer. I can talk about a product being sold, being made commercialized, only the body being recognized and shown. You really don't see that little soap in the hand except the lady. All that is a different situation altogether, but the situation of violence has to be killed. This awareness needs to be brought in by media and by all of us. This is a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna. Urvashi.
Kunal, can I ask you a question which
Certainly.
will be part of... you know that the word seminal comes from semen.
Yes, yes.
Violence is also in language. And I would not use that word to describe anything important, because in using that, you are actually masculinizing the importance of something and insulting women. So if in the future, when you want to say something, don't say seminal. Okay? And that links to the broader point that I actually want to make, which is that we are here talking about media. But actually, it's not only about media, because what the absences or the invisibilities or the lack of discussion about violence against women in the media is something that is reflected in us as well. And if you look at when the governments of the world got together to develop the Millennium Development Goals, not one of them identified in the 10 indicators that they identified which block development, not one of them identified violence against women. And had they been aware of that and aware of the tremendous economic costs of such violence, which Bhairavi pointed out, then we might have seen a different awareness of what happens inside countries and to women's lives in there. So in a sense, what I'm saying is that, not excusing the media, but I'm saying it's very easy to pin the blame on media for something that we ourselves are also to a large extent culpable of. And finally, just that after what people call the Nirbhaya case, which I don't like calling that, I call it the December 16, 2012 case, there was some change that we saw in the way the media dealt with issues of violence against women. And the most important change to me was that many media people ensured that survivors came out and spoke, which brought the positive stories in front of people. And we were able to say rape is not the worst thing that can happen to a woman. There is life after rape, and which did away with shame. And that's really important.
Thank you, Rishi. Points taken. We've almost run out of time, but you have been a fantastic, patient, attentive audience. We will take a couple of questions. If you have it, I think, is there a microphone in the audience? Please identify yourself. I think Swati had a question.
I'm Swati. Dr. Agashe, very quickly. Across the board, we have relationships where there is violence against women. brother to sister, father to daughter, husband to wife, so on and so forth. So what is it about the male psyche that you just respond with violence? There are exceptions, of course.
Insecurity.
Of what kind? And how do you tackle it?
Why do you think the whole patriarchal system developed? I think it is. Now, I have very little time to answer, but if you know evolutionary, the female species have come after male species, right? So probably we are waiting for the new species to come where we won't have any difference between male and female, hopefully, I think.
I thought it was a female who came first. The mama in Africa. Lucy.
Rajuda, please.
See, I have one question to Mr. Kaarthikeyan, sir. You did say time and again that not everything was perfect. A lot of things need to be changed. You have also referred to immediately after independence and how the mindset was at that time. Since then till now, a lot of things have not remained perfect and have needed change. Who will take up the responsibility of bringing up the change? People like you, sir, who were insiders while you were on the job? Or at that time, you could not say what you wanted to say? Or when you are outsiders now, when you are out of the job, is it still your responsibility to try and be a catalyst to some kind of a change?
See, no single individual can bring about such big changes. See, of the population, I suppose we are relating it to the subject on hand, that is violence against women. Of the population are women, remaining of also came through women. After all, we all have mothers, isn't it so? Still, why this type of an attitude, wanting to show power over them? That is because of physically, because we feel more powerful. We want to mentally dominate. That has been a system. It was not so earlier. It all came in between. After all, it's a system which worshipped women as Shakti. Even when you talk about Shiva, they say the power came through the women. This is the distortion which has taken place. No single individual can do it. That is why the purpose of this, conversation or panel discussion is to create awareness, more awareness, so that each one of us can go. And in our own way, we can fight about the change. The change has to come from the power of the people. It will happen. More and more people will demand changes. It will happen. See, from the time when when members of parliament wanted to propose a bill in the parliament to say that women should continue to jump into the funeral pyre, to now, there is a lot of change. This change is taking place. We should want to speed it up. It will happen only by panel discussions like this. We want to sensitize the media to be also more responsible. We want the media to highlight also the worst exploitation of the children being put into sex trade. And we are closing our eyes. We should talk about it. See, you need courage to talk about subjects like this, which we don't want to talk. So the silence is the biggest culprit. We are all guilty of the silence when we are bound to speak. We don't speak, that's why all this is happening. Let us start speaking, things will come down.
Thank you, sir. Nandita, please.
This is to anybody who would like to answer, especially the police or the lawyers. Do you think that in India especially, that the role of media has got undue importance because of the failure of the legal and the police systems? That we are now looking towards the media to solve issues for us. If somebody faces harassment, a woman, you say, media se baat karega, bhi bula lega TV ko. Instead of saying, I'll go to the police and report it. Because you think you might get justice there. And this is making that double-edged sword even more vulnerable.
Ma'am, I tell you, I can't help referring to a particular case of mine. I was asked to investigate the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. It was the biggest terrorist crime that happened here in this country, a former prime minister being killed, when nobody wanted to take the case in Delhi, so they requested me, I accepted it. But there, my investigation was the most transparent investigation. Every day what we did was sharing with them. I got a message from Delhi, no, you can't share it with the media because we should know first. I wrote a letter of resignation telling I didn't ask for the job. Nobody wanted it, so you asked me to do it. This is the only way I can do it. I believe in transparency in what we are doing. You can't do hush because you have to create credibility for what you are doing. That can be done only by sharing what you are doing with the media. So media has been, see, there may be some odd people, no, everywhere, in every society you got at all levels. But by and large, media has been very responsible. And because of that, the people had trust in so we could mobilize the whole population to chase, and that's how we got them.
So Ankita, do you think media has hijacked justice?
And there is no overlapping in the two. There's no overlapping.
Arnab has.
I think
Well said.
I certainly think that television anchors should not take the place of judge, jury, and executioner, and innocence needs to be presumed, not guilt.
Please carry the message back.
Can I briefly intervene?
Sure.
Ma'am, you know, the Supreme Court has been accused of encroaching on the territory of the executive, the political executive. Then the Supreme Court says, you know, we are intervening because the bureaucrats, the politicians are not doing the job. To some extent, this is true for the media, but I must say there is the media and there is the media. There are all kinds of newspapers, there are all kinds of journalists, there are all kinds of television channels. It's also that because your other systems, which are supposed to, you know, strengthen society, when they fail, that people seek redressals or a redressal mechanism through the media. It willy-nilly happens. But that's true for all democratic societies, and it's not unique to this country.
I think we perhaps,
Dr.
just to be
Sarkar.
the clue, can we have the lady holding the red envelope or the card?
Dr. Sarkar.
She's trying.
I'd like to address this to Lee. My name is Diane Stout. I'm from Scotland in the UK. I'm a seroptimist and I'm very involved with modern day slavery and trafficking. My question is really, should the media not lobby more? In the UK, Seroptimists and other organisations, we lobbied our MPs, and now the UK government and the Scottish government both have bills going through Parliament to stop trafficking. Surely the media really should help lobbying. And I just want to say something about November the 25th. Each year I come to India and I mark November the 25th down in the Sundarbans. I was there this year, and unfortunately I was introduced to a lady whose husband asked her for a divorce. She said no, so he threw kerosene over her and set her alight. I've never seen such disfigurement in all my life. So she went to the police. This happened 15 months ago. The husband was arrested. The husband's family put pressure on her while she was in hospital, and in the end she dropped charges. That man is now walking free. So surely the media should lobby on things like this, on trafficking, and I think the media has a big part to play, and awareness is the name of the game. We're all like-minded here. We've got to tell everybody else. The media really has to work very hard.
Well, I really couldn't agree with you more, and I think there are many more such examples. And in fact, the day the UN started this week of anti-violence against women, there was an incident where a young girl tried to fight off her rapists and met with exactly the same fate. She was doused with kerosene, set on fire. She died of her burn injuries just 3 days later. And we were one of the channels that covered that story extensively. But we were the exception, and I think the more we talk about these incidents, the better it's going to be, really. And yes, I absolutely agree with you, but unfortunately, the reality is that media houses also have to sort of look at the bottom line, and editorial choices are not always determined by activism or what's necessarily the pressing need of the hour. So.
Yes,
I'd just like to add something to that. The kind of lobbying that you are talking about doesn't happen in India. No newspaper, no media house has, to my knowledge, ever tried to seriously lobby for a change in the law. the connections between the media houses, the government, it's so much of crony capitalism. I mean, sorry to put it bluntly, but it is. And as she said, it is the bottom line. So actually lobbying for a change in the law, the NGO sector does it, civil society organizations do it, but certainly I don't remember the media ever having done it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Well, my name is Anando, and I'm a transgender rights activist. While we're on the issue of violence against women, and I would really like to thank Dr. Urvashi Butalia for sort of bringing out these the different intersectionalities and the geographies of violence. And I just want to recalibrate the lens here and sort of want to look at the whole notion of how women are to be seen, because there are many of us, and this perhaps also is a remark on Dr. Agashe. Dr. Agashe, I was assigned male at birth. I identify myself as a transgender woman. And I would really like to sort of bring up the fact that Dr. Sarabhai also raised that there are many of us who undergo the same experiences of violence. And I want to flag this issue to representation of violence against transgender women in the media, especially two cases, one in Ajmer, which happened pretty recently, where 5 trans women were were molested and then taken to the police station, inside the police station, and she was raped by policemen on duty. These are incidences which rarely sort of find mention in the media. I would also like to flag the issue of the recent riots in Trilokpuri in Delhi, where transgender women came out on the streets and resisted rioting mobs from proceeding forward. Yet the news that was carried in the paper had images of transgender women putting on makeup. So those are the sort of stereotypes that we also have to deal with. I also want to sort of flag this issue that keeps, this is just a remark that it's women that ask for rights and it's ladies that get protection. Thank you.
Just to completely agree with you, whenever people use the word ladies, I say, please don't use it, please use women. Because the connotations, the packaging that goes with ladies is just so derogatory to women and so patronizing that it's certainly like seminal, a word to be banned.
Yeah, I've given up on ladies because it occurs too often. But Anindo, thank you very much for raising that, because it is one of the much, much deeper invisibilities where trans people are completely, the sexual violence against trans people is completely sort of not talked about. And just in the way that caste violence is naturalized, so also this is naturalized and a moral value judgment is put on it. So it suffers a double invisibility. Thank you very much for raising that.
Any other questions? We have time for...
I just want to...
The lady in the first row, did you have a question, ma'am? Right.
I'm Monjira, and
my question is
to Paranjoy. My question is to Paranjoy. You talked about some archaic laws that govern print report, I would think. What is being done about, changing certain things like the, rape victim's name not being mentioned, because she is not the, she's the victim. She's not the one who's committed the crime and things like that. So
that is not archaic. That came in 1983, and it was a demand of the women's movement that the name be protected.
The point I was making is regulatory frameworks, as far as the media is concerned, is it's in a very, very chaotic state. I can talk at some length about this. We have one body called the Central Board of Film Certification. We have another body called the Press Council of India. Then we have a third body called the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Then we have a Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. Then we have the Computer Emergency Response Team. And then we have self-regulatory bodies like the Advertising Standards Council of India. After God knows how many decades, they suddenly said we should have some rules about these whitening creams. You have other self-regulatory bodies like BCCC, the News Broadcasting Standards Authority. We have a very chaotic and a confusing situation, as a result of which a lot of trash gets through. Why? Because of the absence of clear regulatory systems which are prone to abuse, and because also many of these regulatory authorities don't have powers to punish. So if you could punish somebody and hold somebody as an example, that could be a deterrent, but that is also not happening. So it's in a rather chaotic state at present.
If I could just add one other thing,
Sure.
Since we've been talking about the violence of language, perhaps, just to be a little more aware, we might say rape survivor instead of rape victim.
Gentleman, third row. Yes, sir. I think we'll have one more question after this before we meet.
My name is Ashutosh Banerjee. I'm in the city. The question sometimes we find in the newspaper, some gentleman or some Indian citizen, some male person being killed to save some women. We often get such news in the newspaper. So what actually our educated women and all the other people do for that family? The person who died to save the honor of a lady is often you will find such news in newspaper also. So what our educated, developed group of ladies, what actually, and the media, what they actually do for that ill-fated family? And
I think if somebody is in distress, you come, safeguard, try to save the person irrespective. So what's your point?
No. It's a question. It's in my mind. What we practically do for that family, for that person who is simply a question. And and another question in the newspaper, what I find regularly, the ads are coming. About the women, the ads are coming. It's not acceptable. It's not healthy. It's for making money. Maybe it's my view. Regularly, weekly basis, what I observe in the newspaper, the local most popular newspaper, every week, about the women, what the pictures, the posts.
I get your point. Yes.
That's for making money. What individually think for making money, they're using such things.
Perhaps Paranjoy made the point that about self-regulation,
actual education required.
I wanted to just add the point here.
Sure.
Actual education required for every.
I'm very sorry. I want to break your little bubble here. You want to be a good human. Exactly. Okay, in the effort you die, because nobody comes with some invitation and predetermined time to die, and you want me to give you lollipop for it. When millions of cases are going absolutely without any penalty, really, please. I am very, very sorry. I take this as a personal offense that this is an expectation in our society that to be human, we must be given lollipops, but we are okay day in and day out to live with a legal system that will not pen down justice to people who actually have committed the crime. I say to you, sir, the day this country creates a law and creates a system where justice is delivered in a timely manner, you please come and let's have a forum and discussion again, and that time we'll talk about your lollipops.
That was a passionate response, if we ever saw one. Thank you very much. I think we've had a very riveting discussion, and thanks to all of you for contributing in your own areas, in your domains and elsewhere. And I for one has not only has my lexicography been corrected, but I've also learned a lot of things going home this evening. Thank you very much.
This program would not have been possible without a few people who I must make a mention of. Mr. Obijit Dasgupta, please stand up, and a round of applause for him. Mr. Shakil Ahmed from Victoria Memorial Hall. Mr. S.V. Raman from Victoria Memorial Hall and many other places. Please stand up. Mr. Shantanu Maiti, who's been here. For your information, the lights which we've done today has been done by Dinesh Poddar. The sound has been done by Bishwajit Prasad. And thanks to all of them, without whose support this would not look that beautiful.
And of course, all this would not have been possible without Mr. Sarkar.
Thank you, Mr. Mekka. That's very kind indeed. So, yes, thank you again. I hope we keep having such forums and discussions to make the world a better place. Good night.